up to Wrestling and Everything, Coast to Coast, with your host, Buddy Sotello Esquire, Evan Ginzburg, and now in frame, wrestling's first and premier ultimate photographer, Mike Lano. So, what do we have on this evening's bill of fare for our wonderful fans tonight?
I first want to ask Evan, because you and I, Russ, are on the West Coast. He's on the East Coast. I heard there was a tornado on Long Island. Tell us about that one first before we get into wrestling and the arts.
The tornado whisked away all the rabid Republicans, and it was considered very beneficial to our area. So I heard nothing about it because all I'm really interested in life is the arts and pro wrestling. You know, a few things are as important.
Tell us, how big is Long Island, though? Because isn't Queens part of it? You know, I haven't been there in a while. It's huge.
Yeah, Long Island is a huge area. I mean, the Hamptons, where all the rich folk are, that's 2.5, 3 hours away from me.
They should have called it Large Island.
Oh yeah. It's huge, and I'm not an island person. I'm a Manhattan person.
And yeah, that is one thing, is that those are very separate cultures, you know, from, I mean, it's almost the difference between Southern California and Northern California as far as like attitudes go.
And Staten Island is where many of the Republicans, that's the only place by me that they voted for Trump, Staten Island.
Really? Okay, I did not know that about Staten Island.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone just told me don't go there when I was in New York.
Staten Island's also home to the Wu-Tang Clan, so that's the good part of Staten Island.
Is there anything to actually see in Staten Island? Is there actually any kind of major landmark or anything that's...
Well, Statue of Liberty is there, right?
Statue of Liberty is really shared by New York and New Jersey.
It has its own island.
It's what?
It has its own island, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you don't actually, it's not part of any part of New York.
Isn't it near Staten Island, though?
Yeah, relatively. Look, I don't mean to get off on a political tangent. I'm really kidding, but Friday night I was at a comedy club in Manhattan, and my friend Nico White was headlining, and he's 28 years old now. I know him since he's a teenager. He started at 15. And he used to be on all my old shows. And the kid is brilliant. He's not a kid anymore. He's pushing 30. But to me,
we had him on Legends when he was still a teen.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, he's going to make it. He was talking about the possibility of a Netflix special, but you know, COVID hit and put everything on hold. But this guy is a world-class comic. He packed the place on his name, and you know, we meet a lot of people along the way, and it's funny. I have a good eye for talent, and and Michael vouched for this. I'm not just. I would say, Mike, you know, Homicide's going to make it, Loki's going to make it, Mick Foley's going to make it. You know, I go back with Mick Foley to when he was working indies and sleeping in cars. You know. I was one of the first people to cover him. And I'm telling you, for comedy, this guy Nico White is going to make it. Trust me.
That reminds me, because I sent Taz a bunch of pictures of him when he debuted in ECW, but also him on Savoldi Indies with the long hair as the Tasmanian Devil. He wrestled Chris Benoit with the long hair in 94, early 94, I guess. I might be a little bit wrong on the dates, when Benoit debuted there. And, you know, so I came across something from the very first Weekend of Champions convention, I think it was 1990, and Bill Apter introduces me to Taz. Pete Sinerch is his real name. And Taz hands me a CV, a written resume, very well done, and a couple of 8x10s of him as the Tasmanian Devil. And Bill goes, Mike, we got to put this guy over. He's going to be great. And I was thinking of Evan then, because that's what Evan did. And I think I even called you like a true to life Broadway Danny Rose, or like a real. This was like when I first met Evan, whatever that was, 88, 89, something like that.
Late 50s.
Yeah, and he was a discoverer of real talent in all genres, music and everything else. And when he had his Legends TV show, and
that's a decent topic for us to maybe spend a few minutes talking about and saying what it is that allows us to identify who's going to make it in this business.
I'll tell you. One, it's sheer talent, but it's combined with incredible drive, because, and this is not an opinion, this is based on fact, the vast amount of talent in any industry is not going to make it. They're not going to make it. So you have to take rejection upon rejection again and again and again, and keep coming back. And
hardship. You have to deal with hardship all the time. You're going to get sand kicked in your face constantly. You're always going to be having people tell you you can't do it. You're not good enough. You're not. You aren't. This other guy's better than you, or this other lady has more talent than you.
Won't work it either. You just won't get bookings. If it's wrestling, for example. So you really have to now, sadly, or with all this insane internet, obviously I'm talking social media, Twitter, Instagram, and all of those things, TikTok, you almost have to be your own PR agent. And who teaches people this stuff? Any genre. It's you reinventing the wheel or reinventing the wheel, whereas others are not going to. Maybe they don't know how to teach you, or you don't know how to find that info out. So you just have to, like you said, trial and error. You got to do it yourself.
The other thing is, older folk like ourselves who were not brought up with the technology, it's like an Achilles heel. I mean, I see people doing absolute, garbage as far as wrestling, the clickbait guys, and they're just, basically repeating what Meltzer and others are saying, and these guys, some of these guys are making good money. It's just garbage, it has nothing to do. Is it wrestling journalist? How many of these guys could actually write? Can you count it on two hands? Guys who are actual writers?
A lot of them craft these newsletters, or these either online or they email daily newsletters, and it's verbatim, word for word, what Meltzer or Alvarez.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I don't get it. How can they make a dime? That's
because they have the tech skills to bombard the internet and get the reads, get the clicks, and it is what it is. There's not a lot of great writers in pro wrestling. I mean, it's a bombardment of information for the most part. They go, oh, he's great, and I'm like, well, he's not a great writer. It's great information, maybe,
Some of it's suspect, but plus, what I watched, like, for example, I watched, there was a marathon of 3 older Reels documentaries, it was an autopsy. One that I saw, I'm sure we all did, on China from last year, 2020, on Reels. And then they had one I didn't even know. I'm guessing it was fairly new, on Randy Savage. And then one earlier this year, I didn't even know or read about that on Benoit. But I'm bringing this up because you've got some people that are like just fans sometimes, and they must heavily market themselves. They're not journalists, and they're sitting there commentating on some of these things, or they put out a book and then they're commentating on whoever, Benoit, and I'm just going, give me a effing break.
That's kind of like how the internet's the great equalizer. I mean, I'm not trying to throw ourselves under the bus, but I mean, we're just kind of doing the same thing ourselves as far as putting something out there and just giving our opinions. Of course, you and Evan are highly qualified. Me, maybe not so much. I mean, as a professional wrestling
I've been
manager,
around. I don't think, I mean, Evan's been around too. I've photographed wrestling probably in nearly every country that's allowed it: Canada, Mexico, Europe, Japan,
No,
Australia.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying just like everyone has the ability to create something now and put it on the internet. And so even those that have, limited qualifications don't need to do it. You don't need a license or anything.
We need a, what is that thing for movies where you get all of the actual legit critics to review something?
Like a board, like a film board or something.
What is that thing called, Evan? Tomatoes, Rotten Tomatoes. We
Oh,
need
Rotten Tomatoes, yeah.
so-called wrestling journalists to separate out the fanboys, as Evan calls them.
Oh, I wouldn't want to see our Rotten Tomatoes rating. That would break my heart.
I was on the internet today, and a guy posts, was Tito Santana a mid-carder or a jobber? And like my blood pressure skyrocketed. I used to see Tito headline the Garden when Hogan wasn't there against Valentine, have tremendous matches.
Wasn't he like the only wrestler to be in like 13 straight WrestleManias?
That I don't know.
I think he was. I think he was like in the first.
He was probably the first.
13.
I think Russ was right on that. But in the 70s, before Hogan even was brought in the first time as a heel, managed by Blassie in like '79, Tito had held the world
with Tony Atlas.
tag straps twice already with forget who, maybe Putski was one.
Tony Atlas was the other.
No, it was Gurria. No. He didn't hold the tag straps with Atlas. He held it with Tony Gurria. So,
Tito Santana?
Tito Santana in the late 70s, from about 77.
Oh, it's Santana and Putski. They were the tag champs.
Yeah, but anyway.
So I saw Tito. It was Tito and Bruno against Savage and Adonis in a cage headlining the Garden.
Wow.
So you get it's on YouTube if you ever want to watch it. It was great. So my point being, here's a guy who was a great worker, gave 110%, was a champion, multiple champion, intercontinental champion, tag team champion. So you get some idiot who just goes, was he a jobber? And then other idiots chime in because they know him from the 90s when they put that stupid Matador gimmick on him. And, it's like.
He was a tag champion in Houston. Excuse me, he was a singles and a tag champion there.
Star everywhere.
Yeah, he was champion everywhere. Before I forget, though, the one thing that's of value on the Reels channel is the RVD little documentary he had, made. But it is good, and he is quite comical. Anyway, Ev, go back to what you were saying there. Sorry.
Well, my point is, day after day after day, there's an incessant pounding and tearing down of legends and late legends for sport. Over the past couple of weeks, I'll give you for examples. Roddy Piper was overrated. Andre the Giant was overrated. Bruno was overrated. They hate Flair. They hate Flair with a passion. Flair was overrated. I'm like, you guys could not have seen these people live in their prime.
Well, here's the thing that I don't get is that when you and I and Mike were younger guys, when we thought back of older wrestlers, we actually thought pretty fondly of them. We actually respected them, the Lou Theszes of the world and the Killer Kowalskis.
I got to work with Thez and Gagne.
Gagne. I mean, you look back on those guys and you didn't ever say, well, geez, Harley Race is just so much better than Lou Thez or Carl Gotch. There was never this talk that
Right.
That there's this weird comparison that my generation's wrestlers have to be better than your generation's wrestlers, or what you watched was a crappier product.
It's not comparing apples to apples or anything. Each of these generations is different, and the territory days, the 70s that Evan and I saw.
The wrestling style was completely.
The wrestlers are doing now. There's limited psychology. not all the time, because that pay-per-view, the AEW pay-per-view, which I can talk about briefly, excellent. And Jay Lethal, that's the first go over for
People
him.
are going crazy over it.
It was announced.
People have talked more about the AEW pay-per-view.
But I'm saying about the styles, it's at times with some of them, like the Young Bucks, for example, and I watched them since they started. It's more high spots and that sort of thing, and you cannot compare that to Johnny Valentine putting a headlock on Jack Briscoe and getting the audience to go out of their minds for 17 minutes. That would not fly today. But what these today, it would be nonsensical then. You can't compare them. So you just have to compare the eras or a given year, because you look at AEW a year ago, that pay-per-view, compared to now, AEW is completely different, in tone. Or you look at a year ago, and Bryan Danielson, did wrestle Rusev many times. I forget how many times, 12 times, and they split it pretty much down the middle in WWE. But with a fresh coat of paint, and both of them different. Bryan Danielson, his real American Dragon self, and as Miro, there was interest in that. I don't think I gave a shit about any of their matches in WWE, because there was not the great, and I'll say this with Tony Khan's booking, of making Rusev, like, he's one of the few real, true, legit heels in the biz other than MJF, who's incredible. And he went over last night in the opener on that pay-per-view, which is, I urge everybody to watch it and get it. And for a while there, I was going to email you guys. It was like the first match of it was for free. I hadn't ordered it yet. And I was sitting there watching the buy-in, the women's tag match, which was great. And then all of a sudden, I'm getting to watch the MJF Darby Allin match. And I go, oh, I was just going to order this thing, but then it stopped and I had to pay for it. But I thought, I'm going to alert you guys. Maybe they aired and we're going to get the pay-per-view 4 hour of it free. But the styles are far different. And even where you were, the Australian wrestling was quite a bit different than the stuff going on in India or South Africa or South America. And head and shoulders totally different than Canadian, U.S., Japanese, or Mexican wrestling, even in the 70s. So you can't compare any of those things in a time period, let alone multiple time periods. What we have today is different, and it's great on its level.
This works both ways. You have the old school dinosaurs who do the there's been no good wrestling since the territories. None. Zero. How ridiculous is that? Everybody AEW are just spot monkeys. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy.
It's like ECW. You had some of the violent stuff, but there was some great stuff going on that was non-violent. So there were quite a few different styles going on. Yeah, and obviously somebody like Benoit had to wrestle hardcore against Sandman or...
I'm the kind of guy that never gets enough of wrestling. When the wrestling is good, I can watch any amount of it by any federation, anywhere from history. And I can enjoy it because that's who I am as a wrestling fan. I mean, if you get me, some old match on YouTube, I'll probably watch it. And if you show me something that's from modern day wrestling that's good, I'll watch it. It's not a matter of like what era it is. It's whether what you show me a Dynamite Kid versus Tiger Mask match. Any one of those matches, that looks good in any era. That's a great looking match of two incredible athletes. You want to see like Bret the Hitman Hart against Randy Savage, for instance. That's a good match for any era. That's a good match, and you can go back. You could see Ray Stevens against the Crippler, against the Crusher, and that's going to be a fun match to watch. Any era, it is. Or you're going to see one of Pat Patterson's old matches. So I don't understand why people just say that because it's from a particular fed, it's going to automatically be bad and something that you don't want to watch.
I don't know where the whole gang mentality, WWE is great and AEW sucks. AEW is great and WWE sucks. I mean, they're promotions and they have positives and minuses. And I always say the same thing about WWE pay-per-views. There's 2 or 3 very good to excellent matches, and the rest is filler, vanilla, any other thing you could rhyme. But there are usually 2 or 3 very good matches on a WWE pay-per-view. But and AEW blows them out of the water as far
Well,
as
they had 8. They had 8. Russ, you got to tell who's ever having a wrestling match at your place. You got to tell them to cool it on the noise.
Yeah.
Yeah. The background noise is killing us, Russ.
It sounds like somebody, like I said, they're having a King of the Rattlers, Baby Rattlers death matches. But there was like 8 matches that were at least 4 stars on, if you want to even buy into rating system, the star rating system bullshit. There, even Meltzer, I believe it was Meltzer, did some survey that by and large, the vast majority of WWE fans that are diehards do not watch AEW. However, AEW fans and diehards, a great percentage of them also watch the WWE products. So they are, I don't want to say maybe more sophisticated in taste, but I'll go ahead and say it. And I'm sure they watch New Japan and probably MLW and NWA and Impact and the whole thing, which is almost like a job having to watch that, because there is wrestling every night. And on Fridays now, 2 hours of SmackDown and then an hour of the Rampage show, the secondary AEW show, which is where Tony Khan is so smart. He's working for the future. He's putting on the younger talent on there. He's not loading it up with CM Punk and Omega and Young Bucks. No, it's the younger guys. And Dante Martin is the breakout star of the week. If you guys watch that, this guy is an incredible aerial guy, and he grew up loving Tiger Mask, as you guys were just talking about, or Russ in particular. So, it's a great time to be a wrestling fan. It's not, when people say, some uneducated people on all kinds of shows, even Busted Open, they say, this is like the territory days. No, they're misguided, because I lived the territory days, all, the great 60s, the fantastic 70s, Evans, 70s and 80s, before Vince swallowed everything up. And it is not, but it is great in its own way. It's different, and thank God we have all these great promotions, and now we've got, fantastic promoters versus, like when there was just really WCW, WWE, WWF, and ECW. There were a shitload of indies all over the place. They were great, some of them fantastic, but they weren't territories. So that's different. Today's indies, well, it's not even indies. Are we going to call MLW an indie? No, they've got weekly national TV, and NWA the same.
Let me just say one thing about AEW. I compare AEW to the Ring of Honor of the 2000s, when they were at the peak, when they had Bryan Danielson, Nigel McGuinness, Morishima, the Briscoes, Austin Aries,
Samoa Joe.
Samoa Joe, Tyler Black, aka Seth Rollins, Kevin Steen, aka Kevin Owens. I compare AEW to ROH from 10 or so years ago.
Mark Smith also, and Sarah Del Rey were.
Ring of Honor on steroids with bigger money. Evan, let's just single out, let's say Samoa Joe, or Homicide was there. It was so loaded with talent, but maybe tell those guys or Seth Rollins even. Did you enjoy them more in Ring of Honor before they became, they went over to WWE, and even with
far more. I don't think Daniel Bryan touched what he did with Nigel McGuinness in Ring of Honor. That was like Flair and Steamboat, Dory Funk, Jack Briscoe. I don't think he did anything in WWE all those years that compared to that. And Kevin Steen and El Generico, Sami Zayn.
Kevin Steen was what I was going to say. Kevin Steen, I enjoyed him at the Ring of Honor shows that I got to shoot. They brought him into Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, the Ring of Honor of the Left Coast, and man, I never seen anybody like this, who would be wrestling a guy and doing his own commentary, holding the mic in one hand and dragging the guy all over in the ring and outside the ring, and commenting and talking and interacting with the crowd on the mic, or being just booming and loud and talking to the audience while he's wrestling. I've never seen anything like this before. And this guy is just so great. I would love it if he'd go to AEW. In fact, all of WWE's great talent, I wish they would go in there, because Tony Khan, I'm sure he doesn't have an unlimited pocketbook, but he can bring in folks.
I think what Tony Khan is doing, and you guys can correct me if I'm in the wrong direction, but I think he's creating a more sustainable product than what Ring of Honor was able to do during its prime, and ECW.
But look at Ring of Honor's strength. Evan can speak better than I can, how they had to reinvent themselves. Anytime they got pilfered, even if teams grabbed talent or WWE or whomever, they would consistently, I mean,
I don't think it's going to flow the other way. That's you just pointed it out. That Ring of Honor lost a lot of talent to the WWE, who then, of course, squandered it and now has released pretty much everybody that had anything to do with Ring of Honor, at some point in time. Whereas AEW is picking up this talent and doing more with it. And I'm amazed that they're able to absorb that much wrestling talent and still be able to put together a cohesive storyline and or product.
Well, some of the talent, though, gets, they have their little moment to shine, like Abaddon, the female doing the crazy act, and then because they have so much and they have limited amount of airtime a week, 3 hours total, you don't hear or see them for a while, or they get a little bit of time, then they're put aside. They have the main guys that you'll see, but that's why they have Dark and Elevation, and they have these shows online so you can keep up with what they're doing. But
I think that's more sustainable than what we saw with Ring of Honor and what we saw with some of the other feds.
The beauty of AEW is you'll have great technicians, then you'll have a bloody revenge match, then you have the women. Then you'll have guys who are a little more cartoonish, but in a good way. It's a great mix, like Ring of Honor. It's a great mix. Whereas in WWE, it's just like this flat line of vanilla for the most part. I'll give you an example. I could give you more than one example. I go to WWE at the Garden. Kevin Owens is wrestling Brock Lesnar, and I'm like chomping at the bit. This is going to be great. And it's like a 3-minute squash where Lesnar just beats him. Okay. Then they got Randy Orton and AJ Styles. I'm like, these guys are great workers. This should be tremendous. And again, it was just like a throwaway match, instantly forgettable, maybe 3 stars, and I'm like, God, AJ Styles and Orton could do better than this if they chose to, and
that tells them to do. It's what the agent tells them. They have X amount of time. So it's so heavily scripted.
It went 15 minutes and it wasn't anything special.
Some of these matches, the intro is longer than the actual match itself.
Well, that's another thing. That's another thing. You're at the Garden and they'll have like a 6-man match. And the intros take up half the time, and it's just like throwaway. I saw a 6-man main event where they marketed The Undertaker's back at the Garden for the first time in 7 years. So The Undertaker's on one side, Kevin Owens is on the other side. If you put $1 million in front of me cash, I couldn't tell you who those other 4 guys were because it was meaningless. It was just a bunch of guys they slapped together. I remember Baron Corbin was there because I kept going to myself, I can't believe this guy's main eventing Madison Square Garden, But the other 3 guys, I could not tell you. If you put all the money in the world, if you put Tony Khan, Vince McMahon money in front of me, I couldn't tell you who was in that match because it was just pablum.
Was there anything good on the show, or is it just the same formulaic stuff? That's what their TV is. You can almost tell. I can tell when I can go to the bathroom or go get a drink of water if I'm watching it live. And most of the time, I'll put it on, go do something else, and I can rewind it.
Like a novel. In between some of these things, you could be penning the next great American novel because it's There's so much
But
gap.
it is a total formula, and you know when somebody goes out of the ring, and you know the way Cole,
Yes.
whoever the announcer is, they're going to commercial, and they always do. You know, some guy gets tossed out of the ring, and there'll be the same verbal thing. What's going to happen to so and so, and you know, and there's always some stupid comedy bits thrown in there.
Aren't funny.
How many people are jobbing? You know, they have this fantastic women's wrestler. She's a big girl, Piper Niven, who's now Dewdrop in WWE, and they've done nothing with her. They give her a little.
Well, let her job.
And then she's jobbing out. And then Ricochet. How incredible, Ev, was Ricochet on the Indies, and he's just jobbing. He's just a jobber there. And what is the point of even going there?
And when I think of Galloway, you know what they did with
McIntyre.
Well, McIntyre, but also the Bullet Club when they brought Galloway and
Gallows.
Luke Gallows, yeah.
Styles. They could have had a battle with AJ Styles against Finn Balor.
Yes.
Who's going to be the friends of the Good Brothers, or who is going to run them? They could have done all kinds of stuff based on New Japan, and the audience would get it. And
or just import that feud and keep it going.
I go to Madison Square Garden. Elias comes out to sing, not to wrestle, to sing. So who comes out? The Good Brothers. They're singing with him, like it's the Temptations or the Four Tops. And then they didn't wrestle, and I'm just like, I'm gonna put a bullet in my head. That's how miserable I was sitting there at this circus. Let me say the other side. Every once in a while, the stars will align, and I saw Bray Wyatt against Cena, which was very good. Bray Wyatt against Reigns, which was very good at the Garden. But just so numb by the time the one good match comes on, it's almost like an endurance contest. And the funniest story was, I don't know if I shouldn't say the name. Bob Johnson, he's a good guy. I love Bob Johnson. He gives me comps to the Garden for a SmackDown taping. And I'm like, I just walked out. I walked out in the middle. I'm like, I'm numb. It's blaringly loud. It's like the kitty. It's a sea of kitties and their parents. It was.
They're back to appealing to kids again, which is always a terrible period for them.
And let me.
It doesn't appeal to my kids.
Yes.
I can say, I'm the one with kids here, and it doesn't appeal to my kids. They don't really care that much because it's in that sense.
Too smart. It's catered to dumb 8-year-olds, not smart 10-year-olds.
Yeah, and it's just it's because when wrestling was doing that back in the 80s and succeeding, when the WWF there was still kayfabe. You could get away with kayfabe, and people still had that plausible deniability that you could apply to wrestling, which doesn't exist now. It seems weird to try to look for adult dollars because it isn't they just announced the WWE package for WrestleMania, and you can pay up to $20,000 now to go.
Let me, since you mentioned this, I'm gonna do my spiel, and the venom will pour out. Okay, 4 nights WrestleMania, $20,900 for a package, a 4-night package for 2 people. $20,900.
By the way, this segment episode is sponsored by WrestleMania tickets.
Okay.
No.
House show, Madison Square Garden, December 26th, $31 to $706 ringside. A house show, not a pay-per-view. Okay. Big E versus Bobby Lashley, $706 plus fees, Madison Square Garden. And I'm going to be fair about it. Everybody's raving about AEW Full Gear, $1,500 ringside. It damn well should be good. It should be good.
Well, it is.
But I'm just saying, $1,500 for a wrestling ticket, that takes balls too. Come on.
Yeah, it's not the family stuff. At my home base promotion, from about 67, 68 on, kids were $3, adults 5. And
Yeah.
we're talking Blassie, Tolis, we're talking
Yeah.
when the NWA champion would come in, they'd raise ticket prices like $2, both for kids, adults. When Dory Jr. would come in against the Sheik or Blassie or Emil Moskris, the horrific fee of $12 to sit ringside for an adult, and you'd see something far more entertaining, than anything Vince has done in a number of years. It's just
my brother and I went to see WrestleMania 2 at the LA Coliseum, and our tickets were $15 each. We were all the way at the very, 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 very top of the LA Sports Arena. But hey, it was we got to see it live, and it was $15 each. So talk about inflation and the price of doing business.
Did you get some pictures of like the wrestlers or celebrities coming in or out of the building or anything like that?
With my Kodak Instamatic, no, I did not. No, back then, that's all I had.
I'm gonna throw this out there, and I have a theory. I could be very wrong, but I have a theory that not all these wrestling fans are quote unquote rich. Okay, and when you're charging those kind of ticket prices, I'm betting some of these guys have an addiction, like a gambling addiction, like a drug addiction. Not everybody has $1,500 to burn on a wrestling ticket, or $706 plus fees. But
some poor schmo that is actually like, some poor guy that lives in mom's basement, he saves up all his nickels and dimes and collects a bunch of aluminum cans and, sells a bunch of meth or something like that.
Yes.
And, and then that's his highlight for maybe his lifetime. That's how pathetic.
I just want to know how when you see or hear, like that WWE special that lasted a couple of Sundays this past summer on collectibles. And they go into people's homes, and the guy's living in his mom's basement, but he's got a zillion action figures. And those things are expensive. They're not cheap. Some of them are $29, if it's a tag team duo. Shit is expensive. So I don't know.
Yeah, you say, they live lives in quiet desperation. I don't think they're that quiet. They
need to get a life. They need to get laid. They need to go to movies. As Evan would say, they need to go, support the arts. They go see a great concert or something like that. They need to. Actually, I'm not shilling for it, but it is fantastic.
It doesn't show up on the. Unfortunately, it's like.
Can you see it? The PWI.
No.
It looks like you're throwing fire like the original Sheik. That's what we're saying.
Well, this is PWI. It's the first time they've ever had a women's 150, where 150 women are ranked.
Oh, there, no, you can see it.
They actually do, with the new editor, it's primarily Japanese women. I would say at least 50% of the women, and as you would expect if you were doing a legit best women of the past year. It is very cool. And now it's far different. They have an actual legit, not a made up, but a shoot interview with Renee Paquette, the former Renee Young, who I don't know why she's got that baby and she's, helping her husband through rehab, and they moved back from Vegas to his home state of Ohio. So, but I would look for her once he's all said and done and fixed and back in the company to do some commentary for them.
It's odd, but it's getting to the point where the women's matches are intriguing me more to watch. And it's not a sexual thing. It's because I find them doing better performances than a lot of the male performances these days. Or they're at least putting more into their matches. And it's harder to predict how the match is going to come out. And it's a little bit more, it's better storytelling than what I'm seeing from a lot of the men's matches now.
I'm betting that the fanboys who do the fuck, marry, kill post, it's a sexual thing. It's not about the holds.
Yeah. The Charlotte Bailey, or not Bailey, but what's her name? The man, Becky Lynch and Charlotte, they have a work shoot going on that most all of us know that was work, that they have some heat going on, and that's why they were throwing the belts on SmackDown. Well, that's going to carry through to this upcoming pay-per-view for them, which, yeah, I mean, it's not even like the old Survivor series where they would be all teams, 5 against 5 or 4 against 4. Now it's like they just have like one old school team match, elimination match, and the rest of the usual things. But now the last couple of years, champion versus champion. But they will carry that through, and that's going to be, they're going to continue to work on that till Mania, and the same with Brock and Roman Reigns, is they'll carry that through, and that'll be, so those will be your 2 main events.
I've barely paid any attention to Survivor Series. It used to be one of the premier events for the WWE or WWF back in the day, and it's now really just maybe a Raw or a SmackDown with 1 or 2 matches that would be beyond what you would normally see on a Monday or a Thursday night or Friday night.
You want to watch some good stuff. I know you guys probably don't watch it. There's too much wrestling on a week, but you should start catching Impact on Thursdays, at least the main show, because it's loaded with New Japan guys now. They've got Minoru Suzuki, the Good Brothers, who really got their fame as a team over there. They've got Finn Juice. Some more Japanese guys are coming. The rumors of Okada is going to come in for a big tour for AEW, possibly do a shot here and there for Impact. So the Impact.
They still have my pals, the Reno Scum, on there?
Sorry? No, they haven't worked in probably a good 8 months.
Oh, that's really too bad.
Scum guys. No, they now are being benefited by Tony Khan's aid almost in helping, because Impact, the roster was kind of pathetic, at various times. And it's weird because it's just like they'll clean house, and there's never anybody hardly that lingers other than, 1 or 2 guys. But, Eddie Edwards is like the only guy that's been there a couple of years now. Sami Callihan stayed around, but he's injured. But it's loaded with New Japan guys, and then that one big doofus from All Japan. So it is worth watching, and it's a pleasant surprise. It's not AEW great, but if you only had to watch 3 shows, I would watch Impact and 2 AEWs and blow up WWE. You might want to fast forward through SmackDown. There's some good stuff, but it's really essentially just Roman Reigns and Heyman. And that whole thing, that whole angle will be playing out with Heyman. Who's he going to end up with, Brock or Roman? So, and that's kind of fun. But that's all they got is one thing in the whole promotion.
That's what I'm saying.
There's nothing that, it is just so formulaic. You could miss a few weeks and you wouldn't have missed jack squat.
Yeah, I don't feel I would.
I stopped watching Raw in 2017. I stopped watching SmackDown before that, and my life has been just fine. Yeah,
well, except that you have to hear from some of these other guys that on the internet.
Because the Bryan Danielson stuff, the Minoru Suzuki, it's been off the charts. Eddie Kingston. Ev, what can you tell us about Eddie? Did you get to see him on a lot of those shows? Because that guy is
I saw Eddie Kingston on countless New York, New Jersey indie shows, and he was always a great talker. And he was a solid wrestler. I don't think he's as good as Homicide. I don't think he's as skilled as Loki, technically. But the guy's a solid wrestler, great talker, charisma, and he just comes off as real. I mean, he comes off as a tough guy that we would know, in a rough neighborhood. And there's no bullshit with him. It's like, that's the guy, and I always liked him.
He's incredible, and the match with Bryan Danielson, out of this world. I mean, AEW has had all the match of the year candidates for American promotions. Basically, AEW. It's just off the charts. And we should say now the new AEW champions, Hangman Adam Pearce. That bout alone off the charts. Adam Page. And Kenny Omega his shoulders have been totally messed up. He, like a day before, he was with some famous chiropractor trying to help him. He couldn't even lift his arms over his head. And the match he delivered last night, it was really, really good. Great storytelling.
To rest up. They're so talent rich. he could rest up for a couple months and they'd be fine. I mean, yeah.
He's got to drop the AAA title first. He's still the mega champion of AAA. And then he can really truly rest, get the rest he needs, and then he'll come back as great as ever. Hopefully, we'll at least see one match with him and Okada in AEW on American soil. It'll be great.
I'd like to see Bo Ramos in AEW. Bo Ramos.
How would he fare in AEW?
No, I'd like to see him in AEW. Bo Ramos, Jimmy Lennon, Mil Mascaras. I'd like to see Johnny Red
get in the ring. Mill would probably still get in the ring if you gave him a chance to.
Mill does. He wears a couple of layers because he's lost all his musculature. I mean, he's getting up there. He's like 77, 78 now. But I watched him in San Jose maybe 5 years ago, just stuffing and putting the padding in so he'd kind of look like he had some musculature. He can't run the ropes. He just can't do it anymore. And it's so depressing for me because he was like the most exciting guy in the 70s. I'm sure Evan, the matches with Superstar Graham, just off the charts. I mean, Graham was not a great wrestler, but in that environment and Madison Square Garden with Mascaras, off the charts.
Plus, he's the most recognizable luchador for, the non-luchador fan. I mean, Mil Mascaras' mask is as iconic as anything else in lucha wrestling for the standard. It's the Hulk Hogan look, with the headband and the tearaway t-shirt.
I mean, he really cemented his global status when the IWA, the Eddie Einhorn thing, started in '75. And Ev, I don't know if you're watching TV then, but that was so much.
I was.
So lucky to have shot those Beacon Theater, the TV, but the outdoor Roosevelt Stadium, because Einhorn, etc., they couldn't get into the New York or the Garden or anything, so they went to New Jersey, the outdoor Roosevelt Stadium, and
I saw Ernie Ladd against Victor Rivera at the Beacon for the IWA. That was great.
I wanted to know from you guys, in your opinion, who do you think is going to be the breakout wrestler that was let go by the WWE in its recent cuts that is going to inevitably go to AEW and be a star? Who do you think has the greatest chance?
If any. Very brief. Keith Lee. What's his name? Wyndham Rotundo, who was Bray Wyatt, and Killer. Oh God,
Karrion Kross.
Karrion Kross. Those three guys for me. Ev, how about you?
I saw Bray Wyatt headline the Garden twice, and he's a total package. He's got charisma, great gimmick. He could wrestle. He could brawl. He could talk. I mean, it's very rare you get they used to call Lex Luger the total package, but he wasn't really. He couldn't talk and
couldn't wrestle.
Well, he was actually pretty good in the NWA. WWE was awful.
After his motorcycle accident, he was never really the same.
Worst main event I ever saw in 47 years of attending was Lex Luger against Ludwig Borger for the WWE. It was the worst main event, really.
I liked Ludwig Borger. He was absolutely insane. About his life after wrestling, right? He was a politician, and then he wound up committing suicide.
He passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah. But and that reminds me, my worst interview that I've ever had was with Lex Luger. He came to Sacramento at the end of his Lex Across America tour, so I was like one of his last interviews, and he was I've never had an interview with somebody more checked out in my entire life. Nothing but yes or no answers, even though I was not asking him yes or no questions. Yeah. He was still giving me yes or no answers. And he was like watch checking and head rolling and every kids were going up and trying to get his autograph, and he had just had it. He was so uncomfortable in that Lex superstar type, super American role that they had, the all-American Lex Luger thing. He was absolutely not buying it. And at the end of that tour, he was just bleh. That was just absolute worst interview.
Well, Evan, back to the question though, had you seen any Keith Lee stuff? Because in NXT he was phenomenal, and when Vince brought him up to the main roster, if you haven't been watching Raw, it was just.
I saw him on Indies in New York before WWE signed him, and I'm like, yeah, this guy's got it. I didn't think he was as good as Bray Wyatt, but maybe I didn't see him, enough or on the right night.
He had some great main events. He was actually he held both titles at the same time, the North American and the NXT men's. So he really had ramped up from his Evolve days, which is where Darby Allin came from.
That's where I saw him. I saw him on Evolve cards in New York. Yeah.
Those had to have been great shows, a wealth of talent that would become stars later on.
I enjoyed them. I didn't think they were quite as good as Ring of Honor in the Nigel McGuinness era, but
nothing compared to that.
Yeah, they had some real good matches, real good guys. I just threw out the number. After 47 years, I'm just jaded. So unless something is great, really great, it's just another night to me. But even with AEW, there's a difference between a 4.5-star match and a 3.5-star match. There's a big difference. So, when you see Okada and Kenny Omega for New Japan, that's a legit 5-star match. Well, Meltzer would give it 6 because it's in Japan. But the point being, there's different levels of great. So, how many times have we seen the Usos in WWE, put on their 3.5-star match, and it's solid, it's good, but the next morning you forgot about it. It's just not great. There's a difference. And then you're watching the same guys in WWE for 15 years. How many times and they suffer from same 5 moves syndrome. Reigns is gonna do the boom,
Spear.
Boom. Yeah, the spear. It's like the same 5 moves, and it's like they're required to do the same 5 moves.
Well, plus they can't do anyone else's moves, whereas many other promotions, I won't just throw out AEW, but they can use another guy's finisher or whatever and incorporate it in the match, and it's not so strict and almost limited in scope of what you have these guys do. Or
it's true, yeah. They don't ever allow them to just flat out do some actual wrestling. It's all got to be like, oh well, if the fans saw you do a Russian leg sweep, you're gonna always have to do a Russian leg sweep. 3/4 of the way through the match.
They've ruined Rey Jr., Rey Mysterio Jr., who I saw when he first started.
Yeah,
they neutered him.
But yeah, he has X amount of the moves and the, not just the 619, but whatever the other one is called, and it's just a misuse of him. Even when you saw him in Lucha Underground, he was able to go back to being Ray Jr. again.
Yeah.
Or WCW Ray Jr. And
they just don't want him to be too lucha. It's like you don't want someone to be too black or too Jewish. You want something that if it's got to be the Taco Bell version. Of Mexican wrestling.
WWE, they shouldn't even sign the lucha guys because they just squander all of them. They wasted all those guys. Grand Metalik. These guys are all great. They wasted them.
That guy, what was his name in CMLL? He was so much bigger. Andrade was La Sombra, the first guy I ever saw to have an earring on his mask. But Grand Metalik, come on. And I think they let those guys go. They
let them go, yeah.
One of them, the one guy who was starting to be turned heel out of the 3, when it was just the 2 and he came back, he just debuted as a face with one of the AAA guys as a tag team for AEW. And man, who knew this guy could work like that? It was like back when he was on the Indies.
Lucha. It's just like they dumb it down for like kids, little kids. It's like, come on, let these guys go. Let them go.
All right, Russ, you didn't answer me as we're winding down here. Who would be your superstar picks, because at the end of the next quarter, the winter quarter, they're going to let go a bunch of guys from WWE, and AEW is going to swoop in and just cherry pick. Another one I should have thrown out there was the former Taya Valkyrie, Frankie Monet, who they let go. AAA women's champion. She's done all of this stuff, wrestled in Japan, extensively in Mexico. And AEW should pick her up. What a great coup that'll be for their women's division, which is already terrific.
Well, I was really surprised that Nia Jax got let go. And I think, granted, she has stiffed a couple of the workers that she's worked against.
She's injuring other people. I don't think.
But I think with the right training, she could be an Asia Kong type of impact on women's wrestling. And I think, they need to, the WWE just didn't do much with her as far as giving her the right in-ring training goes. And I think that she just needs that, because the WWF was more interested, WWE was more interested in pushing her as, this sort of just awesome physical force type wrestler. And the WWE has a terrible history of guys like that, from Ahmed Johnson to the Ultimate Warrior.
I keep saying it. When you're there, you're wrestling for an audience of one, just Vince. And that's when he saw Keith Lee, he completely told him, no, you have to work. I'm saying he might have had agents tell him, you have to work Vince's style, a big man style. And that's what Nia Jax was doing, a big woman style, but basically the same, the big man style, applauding.
I think AEW has the opportunity to reshape her and make her into what she probably should have been.
Nice there. That large female athlete they had that she was already their women's tag champion, who dropped the strap to Shida. Who's managed by Vicky Guerrero. They already have somebody like that. If they bring in Nia Jax and they give her some extra training and then they throw her against her, that'll be something.
Yeah, it would be a much better use of her than she got in the WWE.
It always goes back to caring. You have to care about the quote unquote characters. You have to care about the angle. You have to care about the match. In WWE, why would I care about Dolph Ziggler 15 years into his run when they have him lose thousands upon thousands of matches, and then they snap their fingers and all of a sudden he's on top again or whatever?
Because they're paying him $4 million. That was another thing. I'm just
saying, but why would I care?
They just want to get their money's worth. That's all they care about.
In AEW, when Cody is wrestling his brother, you go, I care. This is interesting. This has emotion to it. You have to care. I was watching boxing last night on DAZN and Showtime, and these underdogs were fighting like their life depended on it, and they were really competitive and showed a lot of heart. And the audience turned on the hometown guys and were rooting for the underdogs because they cared. It's a story. This guy's a 10-1 underdog and he's fighting his heart out. So you could. They're having Xavier Woods against Roman Reigns. Why would I care? Please. There's nothing.
And what the outcome's going to be. And so before before the bell is even rung, you're like, I can script what's going to happen there. I know what's going to happen. Then the sad part is you watch it and exactly what you thought was going to happen happens. Not a single surprise. That is, I guess, the problem that I really have with the WWE is that I can see stuff coming a mile away and it goes completely the way that I thought it was going to.
Let me ask Mike this, because I have no idea. What's the deal with the gambling on wrestling? Because we could pretty much figure out the results. What's up with that, Mike?
I don't know. It should be outlawed. They do have Vegas stuff. I don't know who takes these bets or what, but it's become a thing in the last at least 2, maybe 3 years. The betting.
We can figure out 10 out of 12 WrestleMania matches the result. Why don't we bet on it? What's the deal with that?
Some big money. Nyla Rose was the name I was thinking of. Russ, it's pronounced Aja Kong, who I've shot her multiple times at Korakuen Hall. We should say, too, of the last Sunday of November, the first following Sunday is going to be off. So Russ and I'll will get some
Find some fabulous guests.
And then
You don't even notice that Evan's gone.
Well, why don't you get some jabroni and just like mock them the entire hour? That would be a different kind of show.
I've got a few that might work, but
so
no.
Off the last Sunday in November, the first Sunday in December, and then I'm going to take 2 weeks off. That's news to you guys. Thereafter, and then I don't know what we'll do.
I never get a week off. Yay! I never get a week off. But that's because I'm addicted to the show.
We should all bet on at least WWE. AEW you can't predict. You can't predict anything other than WWE. So we should all make a fortune doing that.
How much money can I win betting on Roman Reigns against Xavier Woods? I got to take that bet.
Can I take a bet on like the WWE's ratings dropping over the next few weeks? That's what I'd like to put a bet on.
All right, you guys. Good night. Combate kudasai. And
all right. Good night, everybody. Good.